Panting and drenched in sweat, I was fleeing for my life. But no matter how fast I ran, the creature continued to gain on me. At first, I couldn't make out what the monster looked like, but as it drew ever closer, its horrifying features became clear. Its long, stringy black hair outlined an elongated, grotesque face. Its mouth was wide and filled with endless rows of jagged, shark-like teeth. Its solid white, concave, pupilless eyes were made all the more apparent by the ebony rings that surrounded them. Although being humanoid, the pale monstrosity galloped on all four of its unnaturally long, gangling extremities like some sort of rabid animal. Overcome with terror, I began to stumble on my gravel driveway and landed face first. I could feel the blood pouring from my forehead as I rolled over and saw the creature leap from its position to mine. It landed, hands first, on my shoulders, and I felt them shatter under the palms of the unearthly beast from the sheer force of the landing. Agonizing in pain, I tried to cry out, but was unable to produce a sound due to the air in my lungs being forced out by the crushing weight of the monster. As I struggled to breathe, the thing lowered its face close to mine and opened its mouth. Its tongue started to worm its way out from behind the layers of ivory razors, inching ever closer to my skin. As it contacted my flesh with a coarse, slimy appendage, my blood ran cold, and I started to gag from the overwhelming stench of sulfur. Drawing its tongue back into its mouth, the foul ghoul seemed to lustfully delight in the taste of my paralyzing fear. Fixating its pale, featureless eyes onto me, it spoke.
"So delicious."
Grinning from ear to ear, the monster slowly started to open its mouth to devour me face first. But just as his teeth began to pierce my flesh, I woke up. The 2:03 a.m. from the display of my alarm clock was the only source of light in my bedroom. Still shaking from the terrible nightmare, I gathered my courage to call out for my mother. "Mom!" I shouted. After a few moments, I jumped out of bed and opened my door to the near pitch-black hallway. I made my way down the hall and turned the corner, heading towards my parents' room. As I passed the stairwell, I noticed a light and a faint humming sound coming from downstairs. Seeking comfort, I descended the stairs down into the foyer. Across the room, I could see my mother standing at the kitchen sink looking out the window. "Mom?" I whimpered. She turned around and gave me a big smile. "What is it, honey?" she responded in a soft voice. "I had a really bad dream," I replied, dropping my head. I was ashamed to be 13 years old and still needing motherly affection after having a nightmare. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Come on in here and have a cookie. That'll make you feel better." I walked into the kitchen and sat at the table. My mother grabbed a plate of cookies from the counter and placed them in front of me. "Try the chocolate chip ones. They're so delicious," she said. After taking a bite out of the cookie, I paused. "What did you say?" "I said try the chocolate chip cookies. They're my favorite," she replied. "What's wrong with you? Are you feeling okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just my dream. It's nothing," I responded. "Well, then go back upstairs and I'll tuck you in a few minutes," she grinned. "Okay, Mom. Good night. Love you." "I love you too, honey," she playfully sighed as she kissed me on the cheek. I made my way back upstairs and my mother began to hum again. Upon reaching the top step, I heard a strange noise coming from my parents' room. I started down the hall towards their door, but stepped in a thick, sticky liquid. "Dad, are you awake?" I whispered as to not wake him if he were asleep. "I think the ceiling is leaking again." No response. The noise grew slightly louder and more distinct. It was a scratching noise coming from the bottom of the door, as if a small animal were trying to get out. I turned the knob and creaked the door open to try to search for the source of the sound, but it was too dark to make anything out. Feeling my hand up the wall, I found my parents' light switch, and then my parents. Absolute horror gripped every part of my body as the macabre scene came into focus. Blood covered nearly every inch of my parents' room. Most of their skin had been removed and strewn about. Their bodies were laid out in front of me in a mutilated mass of meat and bone. Stretched out at my feet, was what I could only assume to be my father's arm scratching at the door. My father, pulsating blood from his exposed muscle, looked up at me, and with his last breath gurgled out, "Run!" Without hesitation, I sprinted from the room towards the stairs, but before I could reach them, a thought stopped me dead in my tracks. A thought so terrifying that I was nearly unable to process it. If the corpses of my father and my mother were in the room, then who?
Oh, Jeremy.
My blood turned to ice. I slowly made my way to the top of the steps, and what came into view was my worst nightmare. Literally. It was the monster from my dream. It stood at the bottom of the stairs, slowly peeling away my mother's flesh from its long, bony frame. I couldn't move. After removing what was left of my mother, the creature looked at me with its dead eyes and hissed,
So delicious.